In 1971, as Philip Leonetti was graduating from high school, Nicky Scarfo was called to testify before the New Jersey State Commission of Investigation that was investigating the infiltration of organized crime into various labor unions. After refusing to answer any questions, including his name, Scarfo was charged with contempt and sentenced to an indefinite prison term. He was sent to Yardville State Prison, just outside Trenton, New Jersey, with several other powerful mobsters, including the boss of the Philadelphia Mafia, Angelo Bruno. Scarfo could have been released at any time had he honored the subpoena and testified before the State Commission of Investigation. But instead, he followed the same rule that he had taught his nephew, Philip, and refused to testify. Scarfo would spend the next 2 years behind bars. Already a proven killer, it was now known that little Nicky could keep his mouth shut. Besides Scarfo and Bruno, there was longtime New York mob leader Jerry Katina, Trenton mob captain Nicky Russo, North Jersey mobster Ralph Blackie Napoli, and Genovese crime family capos Anthony Little Pussy Russo, Joseph Bayonne Joe Ziccarelli, and Johnny Coca-Cola Lardieri, and an up-and-coming Genovese soldier named Louis Bobby Manna. Like Scarfo and Bruno, the others were also jailed for refusing to testify before the State Commission of Investigation. Organized crime investigators and members of the press dubbed them the Yardville Nine. For Scarfo, the 2-year prison sentence did wonders for his career. Not only did he get valuable face time with Philadelphia mob boss Angelo Bruno, but he also got close to men deeply entrenched in mob operations in North Jersey and New York, and forged bonds that he would exploit to his advantage in the years to come. For Philip Leonetti, his uncle's prison term would help jumpstart his career in the underworld, as he acted as an emissary for both his uncle and for Bruno, and ingratiated himself with the mob heavyweights from New York, whom Philip would interact with when visiting his uncle. When my uncle was in Yardville, it allowed him to get closer to Angelo Bruno, which was a good thing. Back then, my uncle had a lot of respect for Ange, and Ange respected my uncle because he knew my uncle was a killer, a gangster, and that my uncle was 100% committed to La Cosa Nostra. Once a week, I used to drive my grandmother to see my uncle, and I'd take Ange's wife to see him. On the way back, I'd take them both out to lunch. Before long, my uncle and Ange had me taking messages back to their guys on the street in South Philly and in Atlantic City. Guys like Phil Testa and Chuckie Merlino. At the end of each visit, me, my uncle, and Ange, we would huddle in a corner, and they'd tell me who to see and what to say. I did exactly what they told me. I was still a teenager, 18, 19. During the time my uncle was in Yardville, I flew down to Florida to see my father. I hadn't seen him since he left me and my mother when I was a little boy. He had an Italian restaurant in the Orlando area called Leonetti's. We spent a few days together, But that was basically the extent of my relationship with him. He died a few years later, and that was it. From that point on, I was with my uncle every day. Philip Chicken Man Testa was a man whose star was on the rise in the Philadelphia mob, under Angelo Bruno, and would soon be named the family's underboss. Testa's son Salvatore, who was known on the streets as Salvi, was only a few years younger than Philip. What Scarfo was doing by way of grooming Philip for life in the mob, Phil Testa was doing for Salvi. I'd known Phil Testa and Salvi since I was a kid. When I was a baby, Phil Testa would watch me when my mother went shopping on 7th Street in South Philly. Salvi and I were always very close. He was one of my best friends. We were basically raised the same. We were both taught about La Cosa Nostra when we were very young. Me and my uncle would go see them in Philly, or they would come see us at the shore. Chuckie was also close with Phil Testa and Salvi. Salvatore Chuckie Merlino was Mickey Scarfo's closest friend. Merlino, who was 10 years younger than Scarfo, looked up to him like an older brother, and Scarfo mentored him in the ways of La Cosa Nostra, just like Skinny Razor had done for him. Merlino had assisted Scarfo in the Reds Caruso killing, and was by his side when he killed William Dugan in the Oregon Diner. With Scarfo behind bars, Chuckie Merlino was running Scarfo's operation in South Philadelphia and Atlantic City, carrying out Scarfo's orders in the messages that Philip delivered to him, messages that soon included murders that the imprisoned Scarfo wanted carried out. Chuckie was a great guy. He loved my uncle. He understood La Cosa Nostra from being around my uncle. He mentored Chuckie in the same way Skinny Razor mentored him. Chuckie was a bookmaker, had his own crew in South Philadelphia. They were all under my uncle. They treated me with a lot of respect. Chuckie was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being around him. He was a very classy guy, always dressed real sharp. He looked like the singer Al Martino, who was also from South Philadelphia and played Johnny Fontaine in the Godfather movies. But most importantly, he was fiercely loyal to my uncle. My uncle used to confide in him. He trusted Chuckie. Another one of Scarfo's close Underworld associates was Nicholas Nick the Blade Virgilio, who was 2 years older than Little Nicky and a boyhood friend of Scarfo, going back to their teenage days on Wharton Street in South Philadelphia. He would later join Scarfo in Atlantic City in the mid-1960s, becoming one of his bodyguards and top enforcers. Like Scarfo and Leonetti, Virgilio and his family had left South Philadelphia and settled in a Ducktown row home right around the corner from the Scarfo compound on Georgia Avenue. We called him the Blade because he stabbed a guy 11 times and killed him. The guy was a sailor, and him and the Blade got into an argument. It happened in 1952, the year before I was born, in South Philadelphia. If someone who didn't know him were to ask him, "Why do they call you the Blade?" he'd say, "Because I'm a sharp dresser. Sharp as a blade." But Virgilio would prove to be versatile in his murderous ways. While Scarfo was in Yardville, Virgilio had killed a man on an Atlantic City street corner, shooting him right in front of a marked Atlantic City police cruiser, and as a result, was looking at a long prison stretch. From jail, Scarfo had arranged for the Blade to get a lenient sentence using a wheeler-dealer Atlantic City lawyer and part-time municipal court judge named Edwin Eddie Helfand. Helfand was paid $6,000 to pay off the judge in Virgilio's case in exchange for a reduced sentence. Helfand took the $6,000 and Virgilio got 15 years, not the lenient sentence he or Scarfo had in mind. The Blade was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He was the nicest guy in the world when he was sober. But when he was drunk, he was fucking evil. He was like Skinny Razor and my uncle in the sense that he was a no-nonsense stone-cold killer. The three of them used to hang out together in Atlantic City in the early days, before Skinny died. When my uncle got out of Yardville, the Blade was in prison. Judge Helfand had made a big mistake by crossing the Blade, but an even bigger mistake by crossing my uncle. On the very day he was released from Yardville, my uncle told me he was going to kill Helfand. The fact that Helfand was a judge meant absolutely nothing to my uncle. He didn't give a fuck. He'd say, "This Jew cocksucker wants to play games? We'll see about that." A couple of days later, he tells me we're going to wait until the Blade gets out of jail, because the Blade had gotten word to my uncle that he wanted to do Helfand himself. You've heard the phrase, forgive and forget. My uncle never forgives, never forgets. Once he got something going on in his mind, that's it. It's over. When Scarfo got out of Yardville and returned to Atlantic City in the summer of 1973, his gang was beginning to take shape and things were on the upswing. In addition to Philip, who was now 20 years old and well schooled in the ways of La Cosa Nostra, Scarfo's two childhood friends, Salvatore Chuckie Merlino and Nicholas Nick the Blade Virgilio, formed the inner circle of Scarfo's gang. With the Blade in jail and Merlino based in South Philadelphia, Scarfo decided it was time to infuse some new blood into his Atlantic City crew. Among the new faces was Chuckie Merlino's younger brother, Lawerence, who had recently relocated from South Philadelphia and was living in an apartment inside the Scarfo family compound on Georgia Avenue in Atlantic City. Lawerence was a good guy. Like his brother Chuckie, he was very loyal to my uncle. He and I were closer in age, so we spent a lot of time together. Two local cement contractors named Alfredo Ferraro and Vincent Falcone, who had befriended both Scarfo and Leonetti and were constantly in their presence, and a business-savvy, street-smart Jewish gangster named Saul Kane, who had relocated to the Jersey Shore from North Philly, rounded out the core of Nicky Scarfo's Atlantic City crew in the mid-1970s. I used to hang around with Vincent Falcone, me and Lawerence. Vince was a few years older than me, and he was married. But he used to go out and drink with us several nights a week. He always had a lot to say. He was a very opinionated kind of guy. Vince was always complaining about money. Who he owed, who owed him, how much he was making, how much the other guys were making. Just constant fucking complaining. My uncle liked him, but would always say, he's not Cosa Nostra. Meaning, he didn't have the right mindset. My uncle had built a nice little crew. For the most part, it was me, Chuckie, Lawerence, and the Blade. We were all with my uncle, and my uncle was basically reporting directly to Phil Testa, who by now had become Angie's underboss. We were the top guys in Atlantic City. Everything down there went through us. Nobody made a move or thought about making a move without checking with my uncle first. By this point, Scarfo's reputation as a killer had made him the premier force to be reckoned with in Atlantic City. And in 1976, when a low-level card shark and hustler named Lou DeMarco ran afoul of the Bruno mob and was hiding out in Scarfo's town, Angelo Bruno sent word from Philadelphia down to Nicky Scarfo in Atlantic City that DeMarco was to be whacked. Scarfo was happy to oblige. This kid, Louis DeMarco, was robbing Chuckie Narducci's crap games in Philadelphia. Straight up fucking robbing him. Chuckie Narducci was one of Angelo Bruno's top fucking guys. His crap games brought in a lot of money for the family. Ange and Phil Testa tells Chuckie they're gonna find Louis DeMarco and have him clipped. Disrespecting a made guy is against the rules. And Chuckie Narducci is a made guy. So my uncle assigns the killing to me and Vince Falcone. So we can prove to my uncle and guys like Ange and Phil Testa that we're killers. That we're serious men like my uncle. So we put out some feelers on the streets to see if anyone had a line on where this DeMarco might be hiding out. We hear he's staying at some motel on Pacific Avenue. So I go see a guy I know by the name of Harry the Hat, who had a coffee shop on Missouri Avenue. It was like a hangout spot. Everybody would hang there. Harry the Hat was Skinny Race's brother-in-law, and he knew everybody in Atlantic City. So I asked him if he knows who this Louis DeMarco is. Harry the Hat pointed him out to me. He was actually sitting right there in the coffee shop, playing cards. So I have Vince Falcone with me, and we stay for a while. When Louis DeMarco leaves, we leave. We follow him to the Einstein Motel. He's got no idea who we are, or that we're following him. There was a local bartender who was with us, who had a room at the Einstein Motel. And he gives us the key to his room, so we can wait until DeMarco comes out of his room, so we can get him. I remember my uncle telling me and Vince that Chuckie Narducci wanted this guy real bad, and that if we killed him, it would put me and Vince on the map with Philadelphia and make my uncle's stature in the family all the more stronger, because everyone would know that his crew was serious. that we were gangsters, that we were killers. I remember being nervous, but I wasn't scared. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Lou DeMarco was robbing Chuckie Narducci, and Chuckie Narducci was in our family. Lou DeMarco had broken the rules, and when you break the rules, you die. This is what my uncle had always taught me. This is what La Cosa Nostra is about. Before the money, before the power, before everything, comes the rules. Lou DeMarco was getting ready to leave his room at the Einstein Motel, and he had no idea what was coming. We see him walking out of his room, and we run up to him. Me and Vince had masks and gloves on. We were behind him. He never saw us coming. I was the first one to shoot. I blasted him right in the back of his head. After I shot him, I thought he was running away, but it was the force of the bullet that made him fly forward and land face down. Then me and Vince, we just emptied our guns into him. I think the first shot killed him. We did it right there in the parking lot, right on Pacific Avenue in broad daylight. I remember standing over him, emptying my gun into him. I remember the feeling I had. I felt cold. I had no remorse. Lou DeMarco was dead, and Philip Leonetti was now a bona fide mob killer, just like his uncle, Nicky Scarfo. My uncle had me and Vince go over an escape route a few days before the killing. We walked that route several times to make sure we knew where we were going. My uncle told us that after we killed him, he wanted us to throw the guns on the roof of a nearby building, which we did. We then followed the route we had planned, and my uncle was waiting there in a car to pick us up. We get in the car, and no one says a word. We just drive to the apartment on Georgia Avenue, in silence. Now, a few days before the killing, my uncle took me and Vince for a walk and talk through the neighborhood. My uncle didn't discuss killings in the house, and he was paranoid about listening devices. He didn't own a phone. Everything with him was face to face. So while we're walking, he's telling us we can't wear any jewelry when we do the hit, in case it came off and could be traced back to us. He told us not to say a word when we got in the car, and not to speak about the murder when we got back to Georgia Avenue. He told us we had to immediately take a shower and wash real good under our nails and make sure that we had gotten rid of any possible gunpowder residue. He told us to take the clothes we had worn and put them in a trash bag. After we got cleaned up, we would have to go somewhere outside of Atlantic City and dump the bag with the clothes in it. That's what we did after a kill. That was our routine. Just like the lessons his uncle had repeatedly taught him about the rules of La Cosa Nostra when he was a young boy, Nicodemo Scarfo was still the teacher, and Philip was still his student, his most prized pupil. Only now, the lessons had advanced on how to commit murder, and with the DeMarco killing under his belt, Philip had just graduated into the big leagues.
Chuckie Narducci came down to see us, to thank us for what we had done. My uncle was ecstatic. The killing had enhanced not only his reputation within the mob, but mine as well. The guys in Philly knew what we were about now. That we were killers. Real gangsters. It's what my uncle always wanted. Ever since he was around Skinny Razor.
Shortly after the DeMarco killing, Philip had gone into business with a friend of his from the neighborhood, Vince Bancheri.
My partner, Vince Bancheri, burned his house down. We used the insurance money to start a concrete company. One night, me and Vince, we go out. We stop by the Flamingo Motel on Pacific Avenue. They had a lounge that a lot of people like to go to. Judge Helfand, that fuck that had double-crossed the Blade, he owned it. My uncle still wanted to kill him, but the Blade was still in jail. So he put killing him on the back burner for the time being. My uncle would say, let it simmer. Let it be until our friend comes home. When we were in the lounge, we see this kid named Pepea. He was a bookmaker who hung around Helfand and the Flamingo. Vince had loaned him $3,000, and Pepea was talking trash about Vince, telling people he wasn't going to make good on his debt. So Vince tells me about it, and I called this Pepea over and asked him to step outside. I tell him I want to talk to him. So we go outside. I say to him, Vince is my friend. You owe him the money. Do the right thing. Pay him. I'm talking to him like a gentleman. That's how I talk to people. I never come off like a tough guy. Unless I had to. And usually at that point, it wasn't me talking anymore. It was the gun doing the talking. Well, this Pepea starts talking sideways to me. Not a good idea. I punched him right in the fucking mouth and knocked his tooth out. There was no more talking nice. This is in the parking lot right in front of the Flamingo. Judge Helfand comes running out. He's going nuts, yelling and screaming. He has no idea we're going to kill him when the Blade gets out. He thinks we don't know what he did. Screwing the Blade over by keeping the $6,000 for himself. So me and Vince, we leave. The next day, Judge Helfand makes an appointment to see my uncle. I think they went to the Lido restaurant. Judge Helfand says to my uncle, Nick, your nephew hit this kid, and he wants to press charges. My uncle is placating him, telling him to relax. Take it easy. We're all friends here. Tell the kid to relax and not to press charges. We'll straighten this all out.
On June 28, 1977, 2 days after his fight with Philip Leonetti, Giuseppe Pepea filed a criminal complaint in the Atlantic City Municipal Court, charging Philip Leonetti with assault.
So my uncle worked it out through one of his attorneys, Harold Garber, and Judge Helfand, that me and Pepe Leva were going to meet, shake hands, bury the hatchet. So the next day, Pepe Leva and I meet up at the My Way Lounge, which was Saul Kane's place. My uncle makes us shake hands. He tells him, we're all Italian. We need to stick together. My uncle tells him to go to the court, drop the charges, and come back around the next day. So Pepe Leva comes back around the next day, tells me and my uncle he dropped the charges, that he doesn't want any problems with us. My uncle puts his arm around him. We've got no problems with you. You're a friend of Judge Helfand's. We're all friends.
4 days later, on July 3rd, 1977, Pepe Leva was found shot to death with the remnants of 4.32 caliber slugs in his head. His body was found near landfill in the Farmington section of Egg Harbor Township, less than 10 miles from the Georgia Avenue apartment building where Nicodemo Scarfo and Philip Leonetti lived.
Right after this Leva kid filed the charges against me, my uncle went to Philadelphia and got the okay from Angelo Bruno and Phil Testa to pop him. This guy was going to testify against me, and I might go to jail. My uncle wanted him dead, even if that wasn't going to happen because he dropped the charges. To my uncle, it was a mortal sin that anyone would raise their hands to us or treat us with anything other than respect. That's why he wanted Pepe Leva dead. He wanted to send a message to everyone and anyone that we were not to be fucked with. So he got permission to whack him out. That's another one of the rules. You always had to clear a murder with the boss, or you might be next. I was present when my uncle ordered the hit on Pepe Leva. A guy in our crew asked Pepe for a ride home from the city. On the way home, he says to Pepe, "Pull over. I gotta take a piss." They get out to take a piss. That's when he shot Pepe in the head. They had pulled into a trash dump, a landfill. He emptied his gun into Pepe and then finished taking his piss.
Nicodemo Scarfo's gang had all participated in murders, which ingratiated them to the bloodthirsty Scarfo and to the mob leaders in Philadelphia, men like Angelo Bruno, Philip Testa, and Frank Chicky Narducci, and would one day make them eligible for initiation into La Cosa Nostra.